This is Monsteropolis, a show about anomalies, legends, and monsters. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Seth Breedlove. I'm joined, as always, by my pal, Mark Matsky.
Oh, hi.
Hey. We're still here.
Still here.
Still doing it. Let's talk about the trip. So we already discussed the first, basically, 3 days of the trip, which were entirely B-roll centric. And I have to say, it did not feel like we were making a movie. It felt like we were kind of just exploring a place, and we were having a blast, and it was very laid back. I don't think there was anything really that stressful outside of getting lost on A-Line Road. I can't think of anything really that stressful.
No, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
Yeah, we had a good breakfast one day in Forks.
Oh, yes.
Did an interview and had a good breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
That interview was kind of early, too. Wasn't it like 8 a.m. or something? The Mike's interview?
Yeah.
It was early.
It was, yeah. And time is very fluid when you go from east to west.
I woke up every day very early. And some days I could manage to stay in bed for a little while and get some further sleep. And other days I just got up and did stuff. So
it was 9 o'clock when we met him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for some reason it felt very early. We headed for the nest site from Forks on our day 4, and this was the day where we were going to meet up with the Olympic project. And so this day is where to me the film kicks off. So this is where it felt like production really kicked into high gear. And one thing, I don't know if you heard Alex's show or not, but Todd Hale said one thing that surprised him was that we never stopped filming. It was like, the filming never stopped.
Right.
And he's like, he expected it would be like kind of a, we shoot some stuff and then we'd stop. But he said there was never a point while we were there where someone wasn't shooting something. Mm-hmm. And that's true. Like I don't know that I've seen that on an STM shoot to that extent. There was constantly, at all times, at least one camera going, and usually 2 or 3, and if it was daylight, 4 or 5 were running at any given time. Mm-hmm. That's not including Alex and Eli,
right,
who were with us that day too. So I can say that when we met up with the Olympic project, it couldn't have happened at a cooler location. We followed Shane up a logging road out into a clear cut, and there's the group like hanging out, and we drive up and we pull in and we get out of the car and everyone's standing around talking to each other, and we went up and everyone met up. That was where we met up with Alexander and Eli, and that was my first time getting to meet Eli. Probably one of the highlights of the trip for me, honestly. The dude had me rolling like 5 seconds after I got out of the car. So, but we met in this clear cut, but there were mountains kind of overlooking us.
Yeah, yeah,
like kind of ominous behind clouds,
right? And weather systems moving through.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah, honestly, it's one of the most scenic places I think we were the whole time, and just in terms of scope and spectacle.
Yeah,
and there's the added touch that it was private land. I mean, we're only there because of them. Mm-hmm. This isn't a pull off from the highway,
right?
That you would go. There's sort of a cool sense, and this really took over from this point on, that we were there at the invitation of the Olympic project, and just a feeling of being very appreciative for that, because that's what was, the access was all thanks to them.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, it was constant, like pretty much the entire, from then on, everywhere we went with them was because of them. And even on one of the nights we did a walk, and we were allowed to do that walk because that we were connected to them. So we met up with the OP, and then we followed them to the nest site, and more logging roads, more driving. You'll see all this in the film and in some of it in production diaries, although we're holding a lot of the OP stuff from the production diaries just to keep it for the film. Mm-hmm. We followed them back to the nest site, and when we got in there, it was a very Area X vibe for me. It was a lot like I was really getting that. It's a strange thing because we've been to a lot of locations where Bigfoot history has been made, And you definitely get that sense of history. Abear Road is like really good example of that.
Oh, yeah.
But there is something different about going to a location where you're aware that history is being made. So in the moment history is being made here, you might see or experience something.
Right.
So be on guard. That's kind of like the vibe is very different in those two scenarios. They're very different from one another. I don't know if you picked up on that or if you had that same kind of sense or...
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a great way to describe it because you always, I mean, in Area X, I imagine from what you've told me and what I've seen on film, and certainly here, you know, you have this sort of dichotomy between the camp feel and everybody's sort of loose and relaxed and just having fun. But then when you go to the more specific locations, there is a shift that happens. And people do sort of cross over into a more aware kind of, you know, aware of your surroundings and more serious vibe. And that's very much at work. You know, like Abear Road, for instance, I mean, it's historically interesting and you can replay it in your mind, but there's not as much of a sense that something's going to happen right now because of the remove in time and so forth. Yeah,
but X and especially here, like this is recent. Like the stuff that's happening is recent activity. We get in there and we do. I really don't want to do a play-by-play because a lot of this is going to be in the film. You're going to get to experience all this. But we did a hike down to the nest site, and a hike is a generous way of putting it. I mean, there was a trail, but it's really just a path that they've worn from walking down this like hill mountain, mountain down into the nest site.
I'd call it a scramble.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah.
It's a scramble down there.
I don't know if you had the same impression, but the sizzle reel, some of my favorite shots in the sizzle reel are the slow motion shots of our bodies and heads disappearing into the thicket in slow motion that Aaron was shooting from above. Some of that stuff does such a good job of putting you in that moment where my number one goal walking through there was get the shot. So I was always holding the camera up over my head so it's like pointing down getting the shot. My secondary goal was don't lose an eye because you were getting slapped in the face with huckleberry or branches or whatever from the person in front of you who was also trying to keep it out of their face.
So there's no way to prevent.
There's no way to stop it from happening.
No.
Now I grew up in doing this as a kid. This is one thing I didn't talk about on Alex's show that I wanted to. We grew up with a woods behind our house with that Ohio undergrowth, like real thick in the summer. And we bushwhacked through there all the time. We didn't call it bushwhacking. We just called it walking around in the woods or playing in the woods.
Right.
But it reminded me a lot of that. So it was never, I never fell or anything out there. And I would like to think it's because my brain just had some sort of muscle memory from when I was like 8 years old. And I was able to, not my brain had muscle memory, but I had muscle memory from when I was like 8 years old.
Right.
Walking around in the woods, because that's what it reminded me of. But we got down in there, and then I want to talk about this too, because you weren't with me, but I grabbed Aaron and Shane. I wanted to kind of move away from the camp as quickly as possible because we were losing light real fast. And Shane didn't want to be down there after dark because he had to get us back out and then come back down.
Right.
And so he was trying to make sure that we were out of there, by dark. And when you see the movie, I think you'll get a sense that when we were going down in, the sun was already setting pretty good. I mean, we were getting that orange light was coming through the trees, and it was starting to get dark already.
Right.
And in fact, by the time we got out to the main trail when we left, it was already dark.
And to be clear, we didn't go to the nest site proper that first night.
Yeah, I made it sound like
we went down to their camp that they had set up that was actually above where the nest site is
Which
located.
was the first time they've camped in there. So they've never camped in that area before. They've never camped that close to the nest site. The nest site was about, he said, maybe 90 yards from where... That actually seems excessive. I don't think it's that far from where that camp is. I said maybe 50 yards from that.
Yeah, it's
40,
it's so
40
hard to tell because there's no visual reference really.
Well, I watched the footage, and from the camp down to the nest site is less than 5 minutes on video. So it's not far because you're moving so slow because of the bush.
Right.
I'd really say 40, 50 yards tops.
Yeah.
To the nest site. But they're camped above it in this little clearing that they had made specifically for this. So Alex and Eli are camping out in the woods at the nest site for the first time. Basically, anyone's ever stayed there. So you'll get to see that in Beyond the Trail. That's what I mean about how the episodes or the film and Alex's film will kind of intertwine with one another, because you'll meet that camp through us, but see them actually staying in it in his Beyond the Trail. So it's a really cool. But anyway, Shane and I jumped off into the bush, not far, like 10 yards. We were barely, 40, 50 feet from camp. We were right there.
But no one could see you.
We couldn't see you, and the only thing we could hear was occasionally the girls laughing or whatever. Now, what was crazy was we've been all over the woods around the country, and I've talked at length about growing up on the road, travel. I spent tons of hours in the Great Smoky Mountains and around Pennsylvania in the forests and deep south. I've never once seen bear track in the woods. Never. I've never found a bear track anywhere. We were in this place for 10 minutes, and we get down, Shane and me and Aaron are in this bush, and I look down and I see this. The first thing I noticed was a little opening in the undergrowth, which immediately catches your attention because there is no opening. There's no openings anywhere.
Right.
And I said, what's this? And he's like, that's going to be a bear trail. And I was like, okay. So I get down on my hands and knees because I was excited to see it.
Yeah.
And as soon as I get down, I'm looking right at a bear track, like a big black bear track right in front of me. And he said, oh yeah, that's fresh. And so this thing had been through there earlier, Did
you get a shot of it?
Yeah, we filmed it. I don't think I took a still or anything, but I was filming it when I was there. We were filming the whole time. From that, pretty much as soon as we started that descent into that area, I never stopped filming. Saw that's on camera. We found this black bear track. And then we came back and met up with the group. Now, at that point, like, what were you guys doing at the camp? Were you just talking about the history of the area?
Yeah.
Do we want to talk a little bit about the history of the area on the show? Because we're just saying nest site, but a lot of people might have no idea.
Yeah, what that means. Think we can. We probably should.
I'll let you.
Well, the way that should I get into how
they found it is really interesting.
Yeah, it was the site itself. The site of the nests was discovered by a surveyor, who was. There's laws concerning how close you can log to a salmon-bearing river. So this surveyor was just doing his normal business in that remote location and tying off ribbons onto trees to indicate how far you can log and no farther. And he's the one who came upon things that he had never seen before in the woods, which included these depressions in the ground, the huckleberry branches that had been snapped off 7, 8, 9 feet up on the bushes and arranged in a very intricate way to create what, especially when they were first discovered, resembled nests. And he reported that to the owner of the land. The owner of that land knew of Derek Randall's interest in the Bigfoot subject and essentially said to Derek and the Olympic project by extension, I found these things, or one of my men found these things. We don't know what to make of them. We're not going to harvest this land for 5 years. Would you like access to it? Because if you do, then you can use this as an investigation site for that period of time. And so that's how they were able to gain and maintain access to this particular site. And the clock is ticking, as far as I can tell. They're into year 6 at this point, and I don't know if they've received any
There's
idea
a delay.
of timing.
There's a delay, but I don't think they know how long the delay is.
Right.
But it might be for a little while.
Yeah. So that's how they the Olympic project came into the permission to be on this land in the first place. And it's one of those things where having the right sort of network of relationships and having a good reputation helps.
Mm-hmm.
Because Derek was thought of and brought into this at the right time.
But we were the first film crew allowed down into the nest site itself. And then, so we're being given access to all the original video, photos, like some analysis data, things like that we're going to put in the movie. But you'll be able to see the nest site, which is like the first time, I think, outside of, like they've been pretty public about things. Well, not pretty, they've been somewhat public about the nest sites, but you'll actually get to be introduced to them through the film, like we were.
Mm-hmm.
So we came back out, we hiked back out, and by then it was dark. By the time we made our way back up the mountain, it was dark, and we spent the next hour, we split into two groups. Because there were so many of us, it just didn't seem like we were going to get anything accomplished with all of us walking around in the woods. So we split into two groups, and your group was comprised of, who was in your group?
It's Alex me and Andy.
Yeah.
And Todd.
Yeah.
Brandon, I think, was with us.
Yeah.
And
was Alex in you?
Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was Adrian and me and Nicole, Aaron, Chris Spencer, and Rebecca Slick.
Okay.
Were in our group. Was Cindy with you
so
guys?
So Shane
Cindy
was with us.
Yes, Shane was with you guys. And Cindy? Because I don't think Cindy was with us, unless she went back into camp.
Yeah.
Anyway, we split up, and I got a really awesome interview, which, by the way, did you see the clip of that interview in the sizzle reel? Chris's? Where he's wearing the red hair?
Yeah.
That's like one of my favorite visuals from the whole thing, because there's like steam coming off of his hat and stuff. It just looks amazing.
Yeah.
We interviewed Chris, and Chris showed us some of his audio recorders. And for those that don't know, Chris Spencer does audio. He's kind of like one of the audio specialists in the Olympic project. So he does audio recording is probably his main area of expertise, but he does audio analysis as well. And really, really amazing stuff. He took us out to where he had one of his recorders hidden, and it just looks awesome. He had it like under this moss in this old dead tree stump. It was just super cool.
Yeah.
And we did hear some weird noises out there that night, and some of it is on camera. We discovered the next night when we went out that there's actually a lot of sound out in that area. There's distant dogs. There's we'll talk about that when we get to the next night. But that was our nest site introduction. We didn't get to the nest. The actual introduction to the nest took place the next day, which we came back the next day, same location, hiked back into the area, this time with Derek Randall's leading us, and then Derek actually took us down into the nests. And that was I don't want to get too deep into this, but I keep saying that, but so we followed Derek down into the nests, and the first thing I noticed, I knew we were at the nest site before he'd said a word, because of there wasn't the amount of undergrowth. It was like you could clearly see that there had been some, he called it devastation. He said this place was devastated when they found it, compared to the area around it. Like something had torn apart everything in the area to build those nests. And you go from massive amounts of undergrowth, so bad that you're like you're keeping your arms up to protect your face and everything else, down into this area where all of a sudden it's like, it's not clear cut or anything, but like there's a clearing.
And there's no undergrowth.
Right, there's no undergrowth.
That's what's so remarkable.
Yeah.
You can just see where the nests are. There's nothing in the way.
Yeah. They tore everything out. Whatever tore everything out to build these nests. And they showed us probably 8 different nests. They identified 8 different nests right there, but there's more in that area. They showed us where there was a practice nest that they had found, which seems to be, like some sort of, apparently mountain gorillas also build nests. And mountain gorillas, the way they train their young to build these nests is they build a practice nest, and they put it they build it in a bush, basically. And they found one of these here, like a practice nest. So we go in there and we filmed for, I don't know how long we were in there, maybe an hour. It wasn't like an extraordinarily long length of time. We were filming, there was a ton of us in there, probably 15 or more people.
Yeah.
But one thing I thought was cool was all the project members were kind of immediately doing their own thing. Like Chris was off doing something with his audio recorders, and Rebecca was analyzing something on the ground, or she was looking at one of the nests. Cindy had just like sat down and was writing up. She's an archaeologist and an anthropologist, and was writing up, identifying local flora, plants. She's writing about local plants. And I just thought that was really cool that they were all kind of like doing their own thing. And then we were down. Have you seen the movie that? Why do I keep forgetting this dude's name? The guy that made that movie about hauling the steamboat through the jungle. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was it's like a famous. I forget it.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
not sure.
this moment reminded me of like our Apocalypse Now, right?
Okay.
Because the reason is we're in this place and there's like 20 people surrounding me. I'm down on this weird incline that turns into a sheer cliff at one point, down into the riverbed, down to the riverbed below. I'm interviewing Derek, who's like resting up against a tree, but then I've got like behind me, I've got Todd and Shane. Andy's up behind Todd and Shane filming over them, and then behind this tree, like peeking around with his camera, is Aaron.
Yeah.
And we shoot this interview in this way that goes on for like 40 minutes. My feet hurt so bad by the time we were done because I was like trying to keep myself from falling down this cliff.
Right.
But someone further back up grabbed a shot. And they must have like held their hand in the air with the phone and shot it, and it's looking down. And you've just got all these people spread, like all you see are like from here up, sticking up out of the shrubbery. And we're all standing there shooting this interview. And it looks like something out of Apocalypse Now. It was cracking me up when I saw it. But it was a weird moment because we were all, we were doing our thing. We were very much in the STM mode at that point.
Yeah.
I thought. But I don't know. Where do you want to go with the nest site? Anything else?
Well, I think the... having heard so much about it and then being there, there's something about it that was, persuasive is a word that crosses my mind. It forces you to consider the options of what could potentially have not only made these as constructions, but their location, where they were situated.
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
And I know people say it couldn't be people. I always say that about X. Couldn't be people. And that would be my statement about this. It makes no sense for a person to be up there. It would be possible for a person to come up there. The easiest way to do it would have been, I guess, if you were in there before it was logging area, and you were down, you hiked down the hill. But why do it? And if you were someone coming up from below, why do that? As a like, why would a person do that? And then to spend all the time building the nests themselves.
Sure. And it would have had to have been a person with absolutely zero possessions. Because when you see somebody moving from place to place, they typically have a relatively lot of stuff. I mean, it's whatever you can carry, but do you leave a mess? And there was nothing like that was noticed in the initial discovery phase.
Do you have a scale of belief, like I always say? I've never talked about that.
No, I mean, I'd have to give that some serious thought, but I came out of that feeling like, there are very few options on the table as to what could have made those.
Mm-hmm.
And where I think the movement for me happened on this trip was towards a zoological, biological explanation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where the whole wood ape thing really snapped into detail for me based on what I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, something that Shane and I talked about on when we were coming back, trying to walk the 40 feet back to the campsite or something. I said, it was hearing the scream and the rock throw in X made me think of these things in a completely different way, like a very, like zoological, like what are they like? How do they live?
Mm-hmm.
And this just like, it was like I was getting another piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of fit with what I already think I know, or at least have started to assume, like about what like how these things might be or how they live. They like, Chris said something that fit with that too. I said, what have you learned? What do you think you know about Bigfoot behavior based on sounds? And he said there's no repeating patterns. It's not like they don't repeat the same sounds. They make different sounds. They have a personality. And his belief is that they're more human than ape. But he was talking about how, like people will say, oh, I had this audio recording of a Bigfoot, and then they'll play it and it's very clearly like coyote, and that's because they're kind of like repeating that howl, and like, or wolves where they they'll repeat their wolf howl. And he's like, you're not gonna get that with a Bigfoot call. It's like something completely different. It's like they don't repeat the same things twice. And I thought that was really interesting because I told you what I thought I experienced that night was something that was just jacked, that it had messed with us, that it actually managed to hit that roof that night. It was pretty pumped up about that.
Yeah.
And that was almost like a jubilant.
Gotcha.
Yeah, nailed it. Which reminds me of something my dog would, like if your dog was, I don't know how to explain that, but it kind of reminds me of it's zoological. It's an animal. And that's interesting. That's an interesting way to put it. It does. The more. It's funny. I don't know if I was expecting a wow moment. There wasn't a wow moment. It was like it was more. It was sustained over a longer period of time, where over the course of the day, I found myself thinking about it more and more, and then in the week, days to follow, it's even more so. But the way someone put it might have been Derek or Shane, said you have to have opposable thumbs to do these maneuvers. They've tried to duplicate it. You have to have opposable thumbs to intertwine some of the structures the way they were made. And again, so that kind of leaves you with just humans. And I guess the question is, why are people there? And the interesting thing, I started thinking about this because of that discussion about the call that we caught on that Derek and that David and them, and this isn't out there publicly, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but there was a call that was on our recorder, and the discussion started being about, is it a wolf or a person? And I started thinking about the idea that we're going to immediately jump to something we consider a natural animal, which is a wolf. But to like David and those guys, Bigfoot is a natural animal. They know it exists. So that's what they are going to assume not assume, but that's what to them it is a natural animal.
Right. They've gone through their own process of elimination.
Yeah. The shoe fits kind of thing. So I think I came away from the whole trip I don't know, someone asked me if it moved the needle for me, and I said yes, but not in the ways you would expect. And that's what I meant by that. There wasn't a big wow moment. It wasn't like something threw a rock and screamed at me, and that just immediately rocketed the needle in another direction. It wasn't like that. It was a subtle shift, but it definitely is there. There was definitely a movement. So that's the nest site. We went back at night.
Yep.
But we were alone. It was a good group of us. It was Eli and Alex, myself, Mark, Aaron, Andy, Brandon.
Yeah.
So there were 7 of us, and we did not go all the way back to the nest site because we weren't able to get into the gate with our cars. If we had, we probably would have walked all the way back there. So what we did is we actually got out, and I want to talk about that. What had happened earlier that same day. Before we got into the nest site, we got in and we actually followed Derek this time. Derek met us at the gate and let us in. And on the way in, Derek had told us a story, and I want to save this story, but it involves a Bigfoot and a tree. And the tree is right by the road, and he took us to the tree, and this was in the morning. And he was showing me where he had tied a ribbon around the tree to mark the tree, and he was showing me how tall it was. And I looked down, and I saw a trail in the woods, like a deer trail. And I was like, something's been through here. And I looked down, and there's a freaking bear track again. I was like, here's another bear track. And so now, and I'm saying bear track, but there was we're not convinced this is bear. And Derek even said there's not enough detail to be conclusive either way. So what we were looking at was a very large bear track, if it was a bear, that would almost have to be a double step. And there was one in particular by the road that I swear had toe spread. It looked like 5 toes that had hit the ground, and when they hit the ground, they pushed it into the earth, and the earth spread the toes a little bit. And it looked like a foot. And it was right by there. But either way, something had clearly been moving through here. You could see you could actually, my favorite was there was one that was pressed down over, I told you about this one, the one that was pressed down over there was a dead tree.
Yeah.
And it actually, when it had hit the tree, it had smashed the rotted wood down into the earth, and its foot was, so you could see the heel on the dead tree and then the toes or claws in the earth. And it was just such a cool thing. Either way, Bigfoot or, we don't,
so we'll it was
never
something
know.
With lots of mass.
Yeah, we'll
basically.
never know which it was. But so that was on that same day. That was that morning. We found there was actually some sort of trail there. Then we went back to the nest site, and then we found another something. It was like one of these things where Shane's like, it's too inconclusive, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense for it to be anything where it was, but it did seem to be something to me. So, and that we do have on video. It'll probably be part of the production diaries. I don't know that that'll make it into the movie. So that night we go back to the nest site. Do you want to talk through that section?
Oh, sure. Well, it was, we would walk, and our basic, I think following the lead of the Olympic project, we didn't go in there to do a bunch of whoops and knocks and to try to get a response. We just walked in and stayed quiet for the most part to see what we would find. And in doing so, there were a couple moments where some of the loudest sounds that we were hearing were frogs in nearby ponds, and they were plentiful.
Chorus.
Yeah. And more than once while we were in there, the frogs would go from the chorus sound to cycling down very rapidly into silence.
The first time it happened, there wasn't even a cycle down, and that was why I think we all noticed it the first time. Someone actually in our group gasped. One of us dudes gasped when it happened, because it was so... It was strange. I've never heard outdoor ambience go from one extreme to the other so quickly, because it was very loud. I thought how strange it was that it was so loud, and then it went to complete quiet, complete silence.
Yeah, and that happened probably 3 times while we were out there.
And people would say it's because you were walking, but one of the times it happened while we were all just sitting on the ground doing nothing. We decided to sit down. We sat in one spot for about 10 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
And while we were sitting there, those extremes happened. Started at one extreme, went to the other while we were sitting there without moving, no one doing anything. There were distant coyotes mixing with distant dogs. There were definitely just, house dogs somewhere barking. But there were also distant coyotes. Was there anything else? I feel like there was another sound. Well, at one point, something was moving in the woods 20, 30 feet from us. We turned our light on eventually because I was getting a little skittish because no one in the group had a gun. Alex forgot the gun that the OP had given him to carry for him.
Yeah.
So we had no gun with us, and we were in an area that also has mountain lion and bear. We had just found bear track.
Right.
And we had no way of defending ourselves other than throwing Alex at him. So we actually turned on we were sitting there in complete darkness, and eventually I just was like, I'm going to find out what this is. And I turned on the light, and there was nothing there, which is strange. Who ran up the hill? Two Aaron and Alex actually went up the hill into the woods. Didn't see anything. So that was weird because that thing was close. It was really close. It was close enough that when it would shift, you would hear the weight shifting on the dry leaves and stuff. And that's why I was sitting, I don't know who was with me, but I said, you can hear it. It's right there. But then we turned on the light and there was nothing there. So that was kind of cool. We were out there after dark and scary things were happening.
Yeah. And the night sky is amazing there. I mean, it was said multiple times during that trip, but one of the unusual elements of the weather is how nice it was.
Especially those last few days.
Yeah, and part of what that means was clear skies at night. And one of the features of the Olympic Peninsula is there's almost no light pollution at all. I mean, your largest city is Port Angeles, and that's not really enough to make a dent in the night sky. And so, I mean, it's a situation where you can look up and with your naked eye, you can see satellites going by. I mean, it's really dark, but also really brilliant at the same time. And I mean, that caught my attention on numerous occasions. Just, while we're all looking down and into the woods, we should also be looking up because who knows what's flying overhead.
So let's just jump ahead here because we're running out of time. And also I don't want to give away too much, especially about the last unit. So day 5 or what is this now? Day 6, day 5, day 6 is all interviews for me from my part. During the day there were 2 groups. Me, you, Andy, Brandon were at the main OP cabin shooting interviews. We shot 6 or 7 interviews in a row. It was either way, it was the biggest interview day we've ever done on an STM shoot. Completely draining. I'm sure it was draining for Andy because it's just like mentally it's difficult to run that many interviews because I'm trying to like figure out, and this was like one of the times where I was like, I should have done prepared questions. I never do that because I don't like to interview that way. But it got to the point where my brain was so fried I couldn't pick up on threads to follow because I was so tired. So I probably let some things go that shouldn't have been. But we shot all these interviews, and while we were doing that, there was another group off hiking, and they found some really cool stuff. They found some mountain lion tracks, and we casted them later that night, so that was super cool. It was awesome being back in the OP. Some of my favorite memories from the trip happened that evening at the OP bar, where it was just when I got back, I had gone with the girls to get them checked into the house that we stayed at, which on its own could probably be a whole episode, just how crazy the places we stayed at on this trip were.
That's true.
The least of the places was probably the Forks house, and even that one you got this amazing forest right outside your house. But my favorite was actually the one out in that one spot with the mountains and it's really gorgeous.
That's spectacular view.
Yeah, but with the last day we actually stayed down on Lake Crescent on the not literally out on the lake, but on the lake,
as close as you can get.
We had our own dock on the lake.
Yeah,
and it was just an unbelievable view. I got them checked into the house, and then I went back to the cabin. And when I got back there was no one there except Derek, David, and Mark Marcel.
Mm-hmm.
So the four of us sit there for like 2 hours. It was probably like 2 hours just hanging out, talking about life stuff. There wasn't a single mention of Bigfoot for that entire time. We were just talking about, there was a discussion about the Vietnam War. There was a discussion about our mothers. Really long discussion about being a dad. Like all the stuff that I am enjoying now that I'm a dad.
Yeah.
and getting older. All the kind of stuff that I want to talk about with people. And so I just had a really cool conversation with them. And then that was kind of, that night we did some stuff. I don't want to talk about what we did that night. Some of that stuff I want to keep because there's a reason. But we did get to see a lot of that. What was it like for you going back to the OP and actually getting to spend time there?
Well, it was really almost like dreamlike in a way. Not like dream come true as much as
surreal,
having dreams about things. Because in part, I think that's because Mark Marzel, for example, who's now part of the Olympic Project, the only other time I've ever talked to him was on Mount St. Helens. So to see him in a different setting, but it's the Olympic Project Bigfoot barn, and to like reconnect with him and just start immediately talking about nerdy historical subjects because you're with a kindred spirit. I mean, that was really special. And the other thing is, immediately we noticed when we walked in, there's on the trail of Bigfoot posters hanging up in the Olympic barn. It was like,
that was surreal.
Yeah.
Some of our movies.
Over by that
Minerva, Whitehall, on the trail of Bigfoot.
Yes. And and I think it's also very cool to see that the location being utilized for its intended purpose, which is sort of like a base camp, with all the members there at the same time and kind of individually, like you said before, doing their things and getting ready, prepped for our little adventures that we went on. It's such a unique opportunity. I really, this time, even maybe more than the first time, felt like a guest at something extremely special, and just didn't, just wanted to take it all in. And they were all so gracious and just fun.
Yeah.
And real people. And
it was I think we forget like what that's like, but because we don't spend a lot of time with Bigfooters.
No,
we don't. The Bigfoot community in Ohio especially is very fractured. I don't know that it's as bad out there. Maybe it is as bad. I mean, it's probably as bad everywhere, but there are groups that are particularly welcoming, and the OP has always been really great with us. And I think, the first time we kind of met them, and it was kind of like getting acquainted, and this time I think we've become friends, and I think that's the difference now is like I consider those guys friends, and I hope the feeling's mutual, but like either way, that it was just a really cool experience being out with them and spending time and just doing it in that particular place.
Yeah.
And I hope after the movie's out, you'll get a read on where we were in all these places, and we can talk maybe a little bit more about it. We have to be really careful with the nest site stuff, so I can't talk about too much about geographically where we were, but it's just as a whole, it was a crazy trip. We never stopped moving. We didn't even talk on the show about the airplane.
No.
I mean, there's numerous adventures we had that we haven't even discussed. We attempted an airplane ride that ended in me passing out, Aaron throwing up in a barf bag, and the pilot turning around 10 minutes after we left the runway. I mean, even the night that we went out for that walk, it's way more than we just walked a little bit and sat and waited. I mean, there was just something about being that close to a place that's active, with Bigfoot activity even today. There's something special about it. Just a crazy trip.
Yeah. Yeah, and just driving around, you're always conscious of the fact that, we're here on this stretch of road alone and something could run out in front of the car. It's the most, percentage-wise, it's the most likely way you're going to see something. And that, I don't know, that feeling is never far from you as you're going around, even in national parks and more populated spaces. One thing I guess a moment that always will stand out for me is when we pulled up to the Hoh rainforest near the entrance, and there's an elk in a pond, like just chomping away. Didn't care that we were there at all.
The next day we saw a whole elk herd.
Yeah. And it was it was truly a welcome to the Olympic National Park moment. I mean, it couldn't have been scripted any better. And then there's the elk over on the other side of the road, kind of watching from
hiding in the woods.
Yeah,
that was super cool too.
Yeah.
We with the big, when STM started out, the biggest part of we used to talk about this, but the biggest part of the way production value, the production value was all in the locations, and we kind of got away from that in the core STM series. Like now it's, they're very much geared around like the recreations and all that, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's what On the Trail gives us the opportunity to do, is kind of return to that. The production value is where we are.
Yes.
So that really holds true with the Adirondacks and the journey, and it will very much hold true with Discovery and the Olympic Peninsula. It's the star of the show.
It is. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and if you're a member of the OP, thank you for welcoming us. Huge thanks to the Olympic Project for being part of the film. I mean, it is a film about the Olympic Project as much as it is about the Olympic Peninsula. There's only one interview with anyone outside of the group, and the interviews that are from outside of the group are still about the group. So I think that does it. Leave a rating or review, and monsteropolismail@gmail.com for letters. Thanks, guys.